Is he there? Jankiram? Yes? We are supposed to read from another book. On Monday we read from another book.
We have a little variety here.
Just trying to get the mood of regular association.
It's good. This is what you have to explain to me what this is.
This is a commentary written by Jiva Goswami on the Sandarbha, Sat Sandarbha. But it is more like a supplement to the book, and it is very technical. Basically, it is in this book he explains about Achintya Bheda Bhed. Achintya Bheda Bhed. Is it there?
Yes.
Jankiram?
I'm here, Babaji. Sorry, I had a little trouble getting online. I'm here. Thank you.
Any question you have?
On the special request of this Janaki Ram, who is a professor in the United States, he's a scholar, he's a professor who teaches Vaishnavism and Sanskrit and religion and so on. So he is devoted to Babaji, and he's also asking him to read with him at least once a week this Sarva saṁvādinī. So he's very, on a high level of understanding.
So you have any question from the previous? Or is it clear now?
I think it's becoming clear. He's kind of we're going into a new section, right?
Yeah.
Is there a?
That's what I'm asking. Because
I think I'm ready to go forward.
Okay. So now he says, Nanu Vedeapi Gravanaha Lavante Mrida Abravit Apa Abruvan Ityadi Darshanad Aptatvamiva Pratiyate. So now somebody is raising a Purpaksha, means an objection, because what Jiva Goswami has established till now is that Veda is the only authority and only means to know what is absolute reality, Tattva, Bhagavan, Paramatma, whatever name you give it, but it is the only pramana, only means to know that. There is no other means, and there is no other shastra which actually teaches about it. And he established that Veda is eternal and it does not change. So some objections were raised on that, and now one of the objections is coming here. And this is a quotation from Satpat Brahmana. The statement says that Gravana Plavante, that stones float, and Mrit Abravit, the earth or clay spoke, and Apa Bruvan, water spoke. So he says, how can we take these types of statements as authoritative? This does not make sense. Stones don't float. Stones, put a stone in the water and it drowns. So therefore these statements speak like the person who is saying them is not reliable, because he is making statements which are not really true. So this is the Purupaksha. So Uchyate, he answers this. So this is the job of the commentator. Number one, to explain the meaning. Number two, to remove doubts. Number three, to show the contiguity. One statement, how it is related with the next statement. And four is to explain what is actually the purpose which is being. So this is what commentators explain. And any Purvapaksha, means opponent, can give a logic to disprove it, then they have to answer it. So this is what you see in the commentaries. So he answers this: Karma Vishesha Angi Bhutanam Gravanam Virya Vardhanaya Stutiriyam. So he says that this statement is a stuti, or a sort of prayer to increase the potency of the stones which will be used in a specific work. And then he explains that Sacha Sri Rama Kalpita Setu Bandhado Prasaddhatvena Yathavadeva iti Nindosha. So he says, as we know very well that Lord Ramachandra, he made a bridge between India and Sri Lanka, and it was made of stones, and the stones floated. So generally we believe that by his power the stones floated, but there are also type of stone. If you go to Rameswar, then the stones are there, they put them on water. Actually I saw it with Subramanian Swami. I was in America once and he was also there, so I went to hear his talk, and he was speaking about Ram Setu, because he is the one who filed it. No, he was in New Jersey, America, and he had demonstrated that. He had a tank and he had put the stones there and they were floating. So these stones are some kind of porous type of stones, and they actually float. So I have not seen this before. So therefore he says that this, either you can say that this statement is about some special stones, or stones used for some special purpose, where they float by the power. And this is true, although people thought that there was no bridge built, but now they have discovered it. Still the remnants are still existing inside the ocean. So therefore he says that this statement is, he says, yathavat eva iti, that this statement does not need any interpretation. Sometimes you have to give secondary meaning to such statements. When you see that the primary meaning is not applicable, then you have to give a secondary meaning, which we also utilize in our day-to-day life. We make many statements which are not to be taken literally. So in this particular case, he says that if you take the stones which are referring to Sri Rama Setu, then there is no need of taking a secondary meaning, but they actually float. Then about the other two, Mrit Abravit, the clay or the mud spoke, and Apo Abruvan, the water spoke. Ityadav tattad abhimani devta eva vyapdishyate iti jayam. So here you have to give a Lakshanikartha. This is called Lakshanikartha. So you give up the Mukhya Artha, the primary meaning, and take the indicative meaning. So the indicative meaning is that the water or the clay here refers to the presiding deity of clay or water. So that is Bhudevi or Varun Devata. So when it is said water spoke, means Varun Devata spoke. And that also is done sometimes. We make a distinction between the Adhara and Adheya. Means the object and its base, we make them one. Just like if you call a taxi, so you say a taxi. Now taxi is not a human being, and taxi does not respond. So when you are saying taxi, you actually mean taxi driver. But everywhere people actually call taxi and not taxi driver. right? So there the word, when you say hey taxi, you actually mean say taxi driver. So there you refer, the meaning of the word taxi is indicative of taxi driver, the person who is driving it, who is like the presiding deity, who is actually the devata of the taxi in a way, right? So similarly here, when it says that water spoke, it means that the deity of the water spoke. And therefore, it is not inauthentic statement. It is not a wrong statement. And such statements are found, so they have to be understood in that sense. Tadevam sarvatraiva sarvathaiva aptaeva veda. So then what is the conclusion? The conclusion is that therefore Veda in its complete, in toto, and always is authentic, apta. Means it is not that some parts are okay and some parts are, have to be, you don't have to do some cherry picking or chop off some parts and I take this is not good. That is not applicable here. No ardha kukuti nyaya, that logic or principle of hen. I only want the back part of the hen because I get the egg from there. Front part I don't want because you have to feed it. So some part which you cannot explain, then you give up that part. And that which you can understand and explain, you accept that. So that is not to be applied here. People do that. So as we know that Arya Samaj people, they accept only the Veda and not the Puranas, because Puranas they have difficulty. I think that Puranas are not authentic, they are creation of some people. They actually make fun of the Puranas. So that is not what he means here. He says it is all authentic. किंतु सर्वज्ञ ईश्वर वचनत्वेन असर्वज्ञ जीवैर दुरूहत्वात् तत्प्रभावलब्ध प्रत्यक्ष विशेषवद्भिरेव सर्वत्र तदनुभवे शक्यते न तु तार्किकै. But he says because the Vedas are the words of Ishvara, and Ishvara is Sarvagya, he is all-knowing, omniscient, which means that he has knowledge which is beyond our reach. Our mind, our intellect is very limited. There are so many things which we cannot understand, we cannot imagine, and things may look wrong to us or false, which may be true, because his understanding, his knowledge is vast. It's unlimited in comparison to our knowledge. So therefore he says jivai duruhatvat. Therefore for living beings it is very difficult to understand the meaning of the Vedas, because it's just like some PhD student writes a thesis and then you ask some school boy to read, ask him, you read it and tell me what is there. So it is very difficult for a schoolboy to understand the thesis of a PhD student. May grasp some sentences here and there, but to actually make sense of the whole thing will not be possible. So something like that. So then one would say, then what is the value? After all, Vedas are meant for human beings. Their utility is not for God. God already has the knowledge, so he does not need it for himself. So, and he gave this Vedic knowledge for human beings only. And if they are duruhat, they are so difficult to understand, then that defeats the purpose of the Vedas. Because the very purpose for which they were given to human beings is not served. So then he says, it is not that it is never possible or not possible at all to understand the Vedas. It is possible, but it is not something like reading some storybook. That's why Puranas, that's why Mahabharata was made by Vyasa. Stri Vyasadish Bandhunam Trayina Shruti Gochara. So the Iti Bharatam Akyanam Kripya Munina Kritam. So Bharatakhyan was written by Vyas Muni for people who do not have the caliber to understand the Vedas. But that does not mean that no one can understand the Vedas. So he says, tat prabhav labdha prataksha visheshavadbhireva sarvatra tadanubhave shakyate. But those who have got the grace of Ishvara, then prataksha visheshvat bhireva sarvatra tadanubhave shakyate. So then such people, they can have understanding and experience of it. Just like seeing other things, there will be a prataksha vishesh. So what is being described, that can also be realized, experienced by the grace of Ishvara. So tat prabhav labdha prataksha. But natu tarkikai, not simply by logic. So if one just utilizes logical faculty and tries to understand, then it is not possible. Like modern scholars, they try to understand, so that is not the way to understand it. So there is a requisite process, there is a prescribed process to understand the Vedas. And if one does not follow that process and then says, well, this Veda is just the babbling of some pot-belly brahmanas. Yeah, that's what they used to say. You know.
Who said that?
Britishers.
Yeah?
Britishers. So then obviously it will look like that to them. So to understand the Vedas, one has to actually live a Vedic life. It is not an intellectual exercise to understand it. You have to ingrain it in your life, and then only you can get the sense of it. Otherwise it is not possible. You can say whatever you want to say. After all, as human being, we have freedom of speech. But that does not make Vedas some nonsensical assimilation of people. So therefore he says that it is not that you can understand it simply by tarka. Taduktam Purushottam Tantre, therefore it is said in Purushottam Tantra, Shastrarth Yukto Anubhava Pramanam Tuttamam Matam Anumadyana Swatantra Pramanam Padvim Yayo. So he says that only that is considered as proper pramana, which is based on the meaning of Shastra and the experience based on that. So first you have to have the theoretical understanding, and then you have to engage in sadhana and get the anubhav, the experience of that. So Shabda Brahmani Nishnata Parabrahma Adhigacchati. So Veda is also called Brahman. So there is Parabrahman and Shabda Brahman. So you have the experience of Parabrahman through Shabda Brahman. Shabda Brahma, Parabrahma, Ubhav mein Shashvati Tanu. Krishna says that Shabda Brahma and Parabrahma, these are my two eternal bodies. So just as he has his own personal body, Veda is also his body. And he is known through Vedas Vedaischa sarvairahameva vedya. Vedanta krit ved vedaschaham. So he is the Vedanta krit, he is the Vedavit, and therefore only by his grace that we can understand the true intent of the Veda, true sense, true meaning of the Veda. And that is the proper pramana, means that is actually the means to know the prameya, the object of knowledge, which is tattva. And that is the only way that one can know God. There is no other way. People say all kinds of things. Why do we need Shastra? Why do we need Guru? Why do we need this? God is available everywhere.
You talked about experience and theory, but what about Guru?
That's what I'm saying. How would you have the theoretical knowledge? Only through the Guru. That's, I said, is a process. You have to go through that process. So, tadvijnanarthameva, tadvijnanartham gurumeva, abhigachet samitpani, right? It's written. Sutriyam brahmanishtam. So it is said that tadvijnanartham, to know that means the absolute reality God. So in gurumeva abhigachet, you have to go to Guru. Samitpani means go as a student. That was a way you carry some fuel with you. And how is Guru? Shrotriyam brahmanishtam. Two qualities. Shrotriya means that he has studied himself, and brahmanishtam means he is realized. So these are the two characteristics given in the Guru. Everywhere it is same. Krishna also says, Updekshanti te jnanam jnanina tattva darshana. Two qualities. Jnani means he has theoretical understanding, and tattvadarshi has experience. Sabde parecha nishnatam brahmanya upashamashrayam. So everywhere you will see that this is the characteristic of the Guru. And that is the only way to know. Otherwise it is not possible. So this is what he says, that shastrarthi yukto anubhava pramanam tu uttamam mata. So this is the uttam pramana. This is the supreme pramana. Pramana means the process of knowing. So what is the supreme pramana? Shastrarth yukta anubhava. And simply if you want to go by logic, anumadhyana swatantra pramanam padvim yayo. Anuman etc. are not independent pramana. They are also pramana, but when they act as an assistant to Veda. Logic is needed, but not mere logic. Not simply logic only and nothing else. Logic is very helpful, but it is not an independent thing. So this is...
I want to ask one thing about this first. When it says yukta here, does that mean that the anubhav or the experience conforms to what the Shastra describes?
Means first you have the shastrarth and then you have the anubhav. This is the process. First you are shastrarth yukta and then you have the anubhav. Shabda brahmani nishnata, parabrahma digacchati. Same process.
I guess, I'm just thinking about this sloka literally, like, anubhav is the subject, right? So it's the subject is the experience.
Right.
So the experience is...
Uttam pramana. But that anubhava, that experience, how it has an adjective,
Yeah.
it is modified or qualified by shastrarth yukta. Otherwise people also have anubhav. Many people have anubhav. There are many people who say, oh, I saw God. Right? I was reading this Madhavananda thing. Somebody has sent to me. This was your friend Madhvananda. I never
We've
met.
seen God now. I haven't. I didn't.
No, he was when he was at Radhakund. Radharani came and embraced him.
Oh, I didn't hear that story.
Yeah. He himself now he's become a Christian.
No, Buddhist. Oh, that Madhavananda. Yes. Okay.
This is another Madhvananda.
Yeah. No. Well, I remember several Madhavanandas.
He's not the same Gaudiya Granth Mandir.
No, different.
Or is it different?
This is a Madhavananda. He was actually a Christian minister before he became a devotee. He was a
Okay.
disciple of Narayan Maharaj. And then he left Narayan Maharaj and went to Anantadas and took Babaji Vesh and Diksha. And then he stayed, he had a house in Radhakund for about a year or something like that, and then he suddenly became a Christian. And
I
now
thought
he's
it was the
he's
same.
on YouTube now with his story of how
Yeah,
he's a Christian.
yeah, that's the link somebody sent me. I thought it was the same Madhvananda because
No. My Madhavananda is a Buddhist.
but he was also at Radhakund.
But
He was also at Radhakund.
yeah. He was right.
So similar story.
Maybe what Bhaktisiddhanta says about Radhakund was right.
Okay, I don't know because I saw that YouTube thing, and then I was thinking, was I only heard his name
it's a
from you?
long story. I don't know him very well, but I think he had a.
Anyway, so the point is that he also had Anubhav, and he thinks. That's what he says now. They're devils or whatever, but there are many people who think like that they see God or they've seen God. So therefore, this is very important here, that you have this experience. Is it Shastrarth Yukta? And if it is not Shastrarth Yukta, then it is not Uttam Pramana. It may be some Pramana. That's all right. But it is not Uttama Pramana. Pramanam tu Uttamam Matam. So this is a very important statement, because these days there are many people who have delusions, many people who have what they call bipolar disease, and they have all kinds of visions, and they believe it, and then they convince others about it, and others also become impressed because
Schizophrenics.
they have all these ideas, So this has to be Shastrarth Yukta Anubhava. If it is not Shastrarth Yukta Anubhava, then better to keep distance from that.
Okay, is Anubhava the same as Pratyaksha?
Yes. Pratyaksha is generally used for using sense perception, but more appropriate word will be, if you want technical, then it is Aparoksha Anubhuti.
Well, because I'm just reading, of course, yes, of course, I'm just reading in the Priti Sandarbha there about the mukti as being darshan, to actually see Krishna, and then he says that there's antardrishti or antar-sakshakara,
Yes,
and bahik-sakshakara. That bahik-sakshakara is better because the senses are engaged.
That is for devotees. But that is again a different process. That we will describe that. Because pratyaksha is also the pratyaksha which we are seeing like this. It's a different process. That is a pratyaksha also, but different process for that. Different energies involved.
So those who have Anubhav, what I have read in the last 2 decades back, biographies of the saints, normally they become quiet, introverted, they don't share it with anyone. Does anybody say that I had Anubhav?
No, nobody says it, but they can say it among their own group. Yeah. Because devotees also like to speak and relish. Generally, you don't speak about your own anubhav to others. That is actually Jiva Goswami mentions this.
At the conclusion of Bhakti Sandarbha, that's the last instruction
He
of
says,
Bhakti
just
Sandarbha.
keep it to yourself. He specifically says this.
This spiritual, as they say, I'm going to say it toward being one of the lecture I heard that material desires are fulfilled according to your karma, but spiritual desires are fulfilled by mercy of either saints or God. My question is that it's not in the category of anubhav, but there are so many spiritual desires which I had in the last 20 years, and they were fulfilled like a miracle which I could never imagine. So, is it also part of anubhav, or is it just a coincidence?
So what is the difference
I
between
will give
anubhav?
you a quick example. I was sitting at Seva Coach, and the priest didn't know me, who I was like 10 years back. And he wanted me to give charity for the Shaya, that 251 rupees. I gave as your name. I said, Vineet Paran. He said, you are the Vineet Paran who did Gavargan, restored Gavargan Prasad. I said, no, Radharani ji, why don't you restore Seva Kujas? So I said, will you allow me to do that? Yes. And then for a moment I thought, why should I do it with my own money? Money would mean like 50 lakh rupees or crore of rupees. And I had no money. It's just people holy. And within 4 days I got huge amount of money from somewhere I was not expecting. And we did it.
Yeah, so that is also.
How do we describe this?
So that is also grace. It happens by grace only.
But that's not anubhav.
This is not talking about this type of anubhav. He is talking of different type of anubhav. These types, it is also anubhav, but it is different.
This is more intellectual.
So this is more related with Shastra Artha-yukta. That's why he said that.
Just one last thing.
Yeah.
So, just to clarify, could we say yukta here means something like conformity?
No. Just doing this in my Sanskrit class with Anna. Yukta with the Tritiya Vibhakti means with.
So yukta means endowed with. Yujir yoga dhatu means along with. That's what yukta means. Just like if you say he buddhi yukta, means he is buddhi yukta means he has buddhi. He is endowed with buddhi. That's what it means.
Right, but I guess I'm confused because if the subject of the sentence is not a person, it's an experience, how do we describe the experience as having Shastra as its... I don't know, it seems like it just doesn't seem like that direct translation applies when the subject is not a person.
Yeah, so anubhav is belonging to some person only,
Yeah,
right? So
Yeah.
the person who has the anubhav will have knowledge of Shastra.
definitely.
That's what he's saying. So if you want to say supported by, that also fine. Supported by is okay, but actually it is more yukta means.
Yukta comes from the same root as yoga, huge. So because of that, yukta just means that it's connected.
Means this anubhav is based on that. It is based on Shastric meaning. That anubhav. It is not independent. So that means first there is Shastric study and then there is anubhav. That's why it is yukta. Otherwise somebody can have anubhava and that is also in conformity with the Shastra. That's as you are saying. So he is not talking about that. Because there is a danger in that. See, these words, they are very simple, but they have a profound meaning. So somebody has anubhav and that is in conformity with Shastra. So he'll say, look, this is pramana, because then he has another anubhav which may not be in conformity with Shastra. So now you will also accept that as pramana and you will be in trouble. So this is the difference between parampara and sant mat. So when you have sant mat like Dadu and whoever, and Nanak Pantha and Kabir Pantha, so they all have anubhav. All of them have anubhav. Guru Nanak had so much anubhav. Kabir also, Dadu also, and Raidas, and so many great saints in India, all over India. North, south, east, west, you will find so many who have this anubhav. Now Sai Baba is very popular. Whatever is his story, I hear so many things. So, but this is not Shastra Arth Yukta. So now some of their anubhav may also be Shastra Arth supported by Shastra. It means it is in conformity with Shastra. So then it will, who is going to now decide which one is in conformity and which one is not in conformity? Common person has no idea. So therefore it has to be in proper parampara.
Yukta could also mean could also mean correct, yeah.
Yeah, it's correct,
So like the,
appropriate.
say that experience has been corrected by the meaning of Shastra.
Yeah, but that's not the sense here. But
It
can,
could be.
Yukta is also used. Yukta is also used in that sense. Ayukta, yukta.
I just wanted to ask a small question. So you consider people like Ravi Shankar and let's say Sadhguru,
Jaggi Vasudeva.
Jaggi Vasudeva. You consider these to be Sant Mat, like you're talking?
Yes, that is the Sant Mat. So they have some experience. It is not that they don't have experience. They are also not just normal people. They are extraordinary people. They have anubhav, but from Shastric point of view, not much value. So those who are Shastriya people, they are not interested in this kind of things. And they may be doing whatever they are doing good, it's all right. But from strictly Shastric point of view, so many things they say and do which doesn't conform to Shastra. And then what happens? Then gradually everything becomes hodgepodge, deviation. So this is a different process.
Babaji, I had a question on this. I'll be on it.
Yes.
So, Shastra is also somebody's experience.
Shastra is God's, not don't say somebody. He already said, Sarvagya Ishvara Vachanattvena. He is the Vachan of the Sarvagya Ishvara.
Because we say that the Anubhava of Apta Purush is what's at least present in Shastra.
Yeah, but here just let's talk about what is going on here. Don't deviate from that. We are talking about Ishwar Vachan here. And that is the only Shastra. He made it very clear in the last class, if you remember. And he even talked about other groups. So, yesham vaishwar kalpana nasti tesham api shastrasya tvarvagjan kritkattvena prasiddhatvat. So, he said no. He said tasmad vedakhyam shastram pramanam tattar lakshan hinatvat tadviruddhatvatcha vedikam avedikam to shastram na pramanam. So, he is talking about straight Ishwar Vani here. Nothing else. And later on he will speak that Veda and Puranas are also Panchama Veda, Puranam Pancham, Itihas Purananam Pancham Vedam Uchyate. So he will include that. So Tathaiv Matam Brahma Sutra Karai. So this is also the opinion of Sri Vyasadeva, the author of Brahma Sutra. So this famous sutra 2119 Tarka Pratishthanat. So that Tarka does not have Pratishtha. Why Tarka logic is not taken as, why Vedanta Sutra refutes Nayayikas? Nayayikas are the only one who prove God's existence by logic. So Ishwarvad is there, they have Mangalvad, and then Ishwarvad is their second adhikaran, second topic discussed in Nyaya. So we should be happy about it. But Vedanta Sutra kicks that out also. Why? Because anything you establish with Tarka can also be disproven by Tarka. So you establish Ishvara by tarka, then someone else will come with another tarka and disprove it. And it will go on like this. So therefore he says that no, the pramana is not tarka. Even if you do it, it's fine, but it is not stable. So tarka apratishthānāt. So it is not fixed or permanent or irrefutable, and therefore not reliable because of that. And shrutestu shabda moolatvat. Therefore he is known only from Shruti. Why? Because his knowledge is rooted in Shabda and not in Tarka, not in logic. Ityadam. So these two sutras, Tarka Pratishthanat, Shrutestu Sabdamulatvat, they clearly explain why it is only Shabda which gives knowledge of the absolute reality and not logic. And there is also the Shruti statement, Naisa tarkena matirapaneya proktanyaneva sugyanaya preshta. So it is stated that Naesha tarkena matirapaneya, that this mati should not be, your intellect should not be utilized by logic to study him. Why? Because he is only known sugyanaya anyaneva prokta. Only when spoken by other means guru, then only you can understand, otherwise not. And then there is also the mantra from Rigveda. So he does not quote the whole thing here. Niharena pravritta jalpyascha. The whole mantra is Natam vidathaya ima jajana anyad ismakam antaram babhuva niharena pravrita jalpya cha sutripa ukta shasas charanti iti. So he says that Natam vidathaya ima jajana. So these people, they do not know him who created all this. And Yusmakam antaram babhuve, he is inside you, he dwells in you. Niharena pravrita jalpya chasutripa. People who are ignorant, they are covered like fog. Nihara means fog, so means they are ignorant or covered by ignorance. So they engage in logic, jalpa, asutripa, mukta shasas charanti, and for their maintenance they carry out yajna, ukta, chanting of mantras. So they do not know. So here also the jalpya refers to this tarka, logic. So niharena pravrita jalpyascha ityadi. Jalpa pravrittas tarkika iti shruti padartha. So jalpya here means those who are engaged in logic. Jalpa vitanda, you know this? Vad jalpa vitanda. So this is the jalpa. So this is the meaning of the word. Ateva Varaha Purane, therefore in the Varaha Purana it is said, Sarvatra Shaktaye Kartum Agamam Hi Vinanuma Tasman Nasa Shaktimati Vinagam Udikshitam. So the meaning is that for getting the knowledge of that absolute reality, it is Agama which is capable of giving that knowledge without anuman, vina anuma. And tasman nasa shaktimati. But if one thinks that one will get the knowledge from logic only, then logic does not have that capability. Nasa shaktimati. Vina agam udikshitam. So without agama, Anuman or logic independent of Shastra is not able to give the knowledge of the Absolute. Because how you will give? Anuman is based on Prataksha, right? And what is the Prataksha? The knowledge we get from Prataksha is all material. We have Prataksha from our five senses, and their range is very limited. Now on the basis of that you are going to make Anuman. So how that will take you beyond anything material? And even if you come to the idea that yes, there is God, this will only give you some knowledge that God exists, but nothing of the experience of that. Because we know that by Anuman we get a general understanding. If you say that there is smoke, and wherever there is smoke there is fire, so all you are making an inference is that there is an existence of fire, but nothing specific about the fire, what kind of fire it is, how big it is, where exactly it is. All this cannot come from Anuman. So when we have an object, one is that the existence of the object, another is the experience of the object. So existence can be known through Anuman, but the experience does not come from that. But the Vedas have the ability to also give experience. So that's what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Jnana Vijnana Sahitam Vakshyami Hit Kamya, that I will give you Jnana, also Vijnana. So as Gyatva Moksha Se Ashubhat, by knowing which he will become free from Ashubha. So that it has its potency in it. That is not an Anuman. So therefore it says, Tasmat na sa shaktimati vinagam udikshitam. It does not have the power, the potency to give that knowledge or experience without agama. So Advaitvadibhischa uktam. This is also spoken by Advaitvadi. Advaitvadi here is not Shankaracharya but Bhartrihari. So Bhartrihari's philosophy is called Shabda Advaitvad in Vakyapadiya. This is a different type of Advaitvad than Shankaracharya's Advaitvad. Shankaracharya Advaitvad is sometimes called Keval Advaitvad. Keval Advaitvad, it is Shabda Advaitvad. So his philosophy is everything comes from Shabda. Ultimately there is only Shabda, and Shabda is just one, nothing else. So he also writes in Vakyapadiya, Yatnena paditopyartha kushlairanumātribhi abhiyuktatarayannair anyathaiv upadyate. This is a sloka which Rupa Goswami cites in the first chapter, last sloka. So he says that Yatnena apaditopyartha kushlairanumātribhi. That thing which has been established by expert logicians with great endeavor. So abhiyukta tarayanne anataipa. Some other person comes who has more deeper thinking, more subtler thinking, is going to refute that and establish something differently. So logic is like that. Anything you prove logically, there is always a possibility of finding something in it. But your logic is based on hetu, and hetu you can play with it, you can attack it.
Babaji, can I ask something about this? This seems really interesting. Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Just my understanding thus far of what Jiva has done, he's really established the svataha pramanyatva vedasya, the absolute independent authority of the Veda.
Right.
And then in the part we've read today, he's giving what I would understand as kind of hermeneutics. This is how the Veda is to be understood. This is the way that especially he seemed to be saying, yeah, there are these areas where you might think the Veda doesn't sound very authoritative. The stones float, the mud speaks. He seems to be recognizing, yeah, there's places where it sounds to be a little bit crazy.
Ridiculous.
And ridiculous, yeah. And he's given different techniques, right? He said, okay, it can be stuti, we can talk about these different types of vritti, you got the mukhya vritti, lakshana vritti, all these different ways of interpreting. So he's kind of given a technique, some techniques for making sense of parts of the Veda that seem crazy or ridiculous, and making it reasonable. And
Yes.
he's also said that this is rooted in some way the personal experience of the interpreter. He's kind of, my understanding, balancing faith and reason in some ways here.
Yes, there is reasoning is there, and also ultimately faith is there. So he's giving a reasoning, but reasoning is not ultimate, as he keeps on saying it.
So my question about this passage from Bhartrahari, when I read this many years ago, I took this as kind of a criticism of a Nyayika or a logician. But could it be also seen that he's just saying that, how can I put it? Well, for example, Shankara, he claims he's got some anubhava, he's Kevala Dvaita, he's got some anubhava of Brahman, and then he's given Shastrartha Yukta. He's given a reasonable interpretation of that, what he considers reasonable, of the Veda in order to justify it.
Right.
And then Jiva comes along and he's also got anubhava, and he gives a very different interpretation. Does this mean that in the future there could be other people with other types of anubhava who read the Bhagavata or the Veda or whatever and give Shastrartha Yukta, or sort of a reasonable interpretation of the Veda?
Yeah, it is possible.
But it's slightly different.
It's possible.
It seems he's opening up a space for...
Well, he has said himself, Jiva Goswami has said that this Shastra is speaking, Bhagavatam, he speaks on the basis of Bhagavatam. He speaks about at least 3 different levels of reality: Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. So Advaitavad or Shankaracharya has interpreted it at the level of Brahman, and Jiva Goswami is taking it to the level of Bhagavan. Somebody can interpret it to the level of Paramatma only. And then there could be in between something. These are the 3 major, you can say, groups. So even if something is going to be different than what Jiva Goswami is saying, it could be any one of these 3 categories with some mixture or some differences, but it cannot be anything, because the whole spectrum is from impersonal to personal. So Brahman is the impersonal thing, and Bhagavan is the personal, and in the Bhagavan, of course, we have Vishnu with 4 hands and Krishna with 2 hands. So he has taken it to the ultimate of personal experience on one side and ultimate of impersonal experience to one side. Now in between there are going to be experiences which will be related to these two. Paramatma is like the central line, you can say.
So does what Janaki-Ram just said, you seem to indicate that Jiva Goswami also accepted the idea that there might be, well, I mean, we see it directly. I've been thinking like this a long time. That for instance, the Bhagavatam, where we are with the Bhagavatam here, and where we are, let's say, with Vidagdha Madhava and with Govinda Lilamrita, these are entering into a different dimension of insight. That's not that is, taking the seeds of the Bhagavatam and growing them into something fairly new. So now this idea of evolution of thinking, evolution of realization as a historical process that's going on from the Veda to Shankara, or Veda to Buddha to Shankara to then to Ramanuja and so on, as we see a historical development in the understanding of the Paramatattva. Now we've reached the end of that.
Well, first of all, this historical idea is very limited time span.
Yes.
I mean, you are only taking maybe 1,000 years of historical development.
Well, historical, 5,000 years, let's say.
Yeah, it may not be even 5,000. Who knows what was 2,000 years ago? We don't have much proof of that.
Okay.
So many books gone and finished. But yes, we can say in 1,000 years it has developed like this. And that's why I said that this is according to us, which is based on Bhagavatam. It is Shastrarth Yukta, that the extreme end is the two-handed form, Krishna in Vraj. And that's what they have experience of, even at the Madhav or wherever, Gopal Champu. So that is what can be above that, because as I said, personal and impersonal, these are the two limits, right? So between these two limits, the most personal can be two-handed form, right? Sense all opulence. If you go to Dwarka, there is again the opulence is increasing, and then two-hand becomes four-hand beyond that. So this is the ultimate limit. Beyond that, I don't know what else can develop. If there is at all possibility, at least what we know, the way we study, we cannot think of anything beyond that. If it is Shastrarth Yukta, then I don't see anything. This seems to be the ultimate, and that's why we say that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the ultimate, manifestation of reality, who is not even Krishna, who was showing some Aishwarya, lifting Govardhan hill and this and that. Mahaprabhu didn't do anything. Maybe that's just a made up story. Whether there really a chakra there or not, I don't know. But he changed them with love, basically. So love is actually the highest. That is the acme. That is the ultimate thing. That is the ultimate development of Ishvara and Jiva both. And that is Mahaprabhu has come in that and given that. So I cannot think of anything beyond that. Because what can be more human than Mahaprabhu? Krishna also had so much Aishwarya, he came with four hands in Dwarka, in the Mathura prison, and then he becomes small, and then he's kicking the cart, breaking it, and he's taking Putana and sucking the life out. He did many Aishwarya things. But when you see Mahaprabhu, it's just pure human. Okay, so we'll stop here unless there is another question.
I have two questions.
Hmm.
My first question is that so let's say that it happens especially in the modern times, that a person may claim that he has met Lord Brahma or Veda Vyasa or Krishna himself in a dream, and that there's a new revelation of a Veda, especially for Kali Yuga, or there's some special shortcut method or something. For example, I know my aunt who used to follow such one of these persons. So the question is, how can one evaluate if this particular person has actually received a Veda from Bhagwan or Veda Vyasa, or met Veda Vyasa?
So that's why I already said that what is that revealed to him, and what is the special thing which was revealed, that has to be seen. Let's accept that he got the revelation directly from Ved Vyasa or Brahma or whoever. So what is that was revealed to him? Can you tell me?
So for example, when I visited my aunt's place, she was not happy that I don't eat onion and garlic, because according to her, Krishna told them that you can eat anything you want, you just have to have faith, and there is no regulations for eating or something.
So that's what I'm saying. Where is written that Veda which was revealed to that man? Did he write it down somewhere, or he just saying it?
No, it was a woman, so she used to just go in some trance, and she used to speak something. And
so that's I already spoke. We already spoke about that.
Right.
These types of people, they are what you call
Suvidavadi.
10 per dime available. So that you find in India, many people speaking like that. That has not much value here.
In the West also.
Yeah, everywhere.
God's
So many. In Australia, there is a guy who is claiming to be Jesus, and he's living with his wife, who is supposed to be Mary Magdalena. What is it? And
Mary Magdalene.
yeah, and he has lot of followers there. In fact, people from all over the world are coming and joining him, and they have a big community in Australia. So these types of things have been always there.
So my question is a little different than the trend on which we are talking now. Is Madhurya and Aishwarya Bhav in Braj, like Hitharvite Sampradaya, they only believe in Madhurya Bhav. You just now said that Krishna sometimes shows Aishwarya. So are these separate entities, or how do we reconcile the fact that there are different sampradayas interpreting it in a different way?
Well, the thing is that when you say Hitarivan Sampradaya, what are they interpreting? They don't read Bhagavatam, they don't read Gita. All they read is Radha Sudhanidhi and Hit Chaurasi. This is their Veda. So this Shastra. This is what he's saying, that Shastra is Veda, and then based on that we have Purana and Bhagavatam and Gita and Vedanta Sutra. So what is their Shastra? So therefore I'm saying that there are so many people in India who have this type of following, and some illustrious people came, and he definitely had some experience. Hitharvata Goswami was not ordinary person. So then this is not acceptable to us. We respect, but ultimately when we go by this standard, then they don't stand in that test of authenticity. It is fine, we don't speak like this to them, but from our point of view, it's just not acceptable. Mitana nitya vihar. So what is the practicality of this? Now there is nitya vihar. Krishna never eats, he never sleeps, he never does anything else except he is doing vihar with Radha, right? But then they are the same one who are going to tell all kinds of stories. How those stories are possible? That vihar is never mita. So when did the marriage happen if the vihar is nitya? Tell me. They are doing this bahula, right? You might have attended that. So how the bahula happened? Before that they were not married. So when they were not married, where was the nitya vihar? Tell me. And if it was Nitya Vihar, then it was Parkiya or not? But they don't accept Parkiya. So they always talk that they are all in the Nikunja, they never come out of the Nikunja. So where did the marriage happen then? So if you start analyzing like this, then it all falls apart.
Nimbark Sampradaya?
Nimbark Sampradaya they have, but they have also, they only say Swakiya.
Sorry?
They also accept only Swakiya, not Parkiya. They are totally against this Parkiya. So they have obviously become influenced in somewhat by Gaudiya Vaishnavas, because in the original writing there is no this Manjari Bhav and all that, but later on this is added. Now they are also saying Radhe Krishna, Radhe Krishna. But they have their original sadhana is there, which have become influenced by this. What is the second question?
The second question is from last class. Last class we learned that the world is created from Shabda. So Shabda is eternal. So it means the Sanskrit language is also eternal. Now there is this scholars hypothesize a Proto-Indo-European language. I mean, the assumption is that nothing is eternal. But my question is that in languages such as Marathi or Hindi, one can trace its roots to Sanskrit. For example, there's Marathi, Old Marathi, Prakrit, and Sanskrit. My question is, in Sanskrit, I have not studied it. So, in Sanskrit, do we see a historical gradation of language? And if yes, how do we explain that? Because it should be the same if it is eternal.
Well, that's why the language, we have two types of Sanskrit. There is a Vedic Sanskrit and there is a Laukik Sanskrit. So Vedic Sanskrit is what is in the Vedas. It is not spoken, it is not written by anybody. The rest is called Laukik. So there is changes which happen in the Laukik, but the Vedic is fixed. Their meanings, the grammatical rules of Vedic Sanskrit. There is no change in that. So this language is a big issue, this Indo-prototype and all this. There's so much work done on that. My always question is that how language came in the first place. How did monkeys started when they became human being? How did they start speaking and what language they spoke? What came first, the thought or the language? Because without thought there is no language. So I have not done research on it. I'm sure there must be theories about that. How language came and what was the need for it. Monkeys seem to be surviving better than human beings if survival of the fittest is the cause. Human beings are most fragile of all species. Any other species child grows without much effort. Human being is it takes so much care that it cannot survive. So how is that it developed like this when you say survival of the fittest? Human baby is the most fragile. Any other baby, they don't need much. So what was the need to evolve like this and get into trouble? I mean, he will be jumping on the trees happily without much worries. Now people are trying to live on trees. Okay, we'll stop.
Thank you very much, Babaji.
No problem.